So there's this story that I've never told on stage before. That is the story of how a little baby bird taught me how to cry like a man. So it sounds like a story you want to hear? Yeah. Okay. So let's see where this takes us. So just about 2 years ago, I was walking my dogs at night, and by the side of the road was a little baby crow. And he was sitting there, and my dogs went up to him, and he didn't move. And I figured something must be wrong with him. So I took a closer look, and his eye was all jammed up, and his wing was kind of broken. And I was like, this guy isn't safe. I know I shouldn't take in wild animals from the street, but maybe if I'll take him in and I'll take care of him for a while, and he might just feel better and just fly off. So I took him home, and I made this little kind of bed for him, and he spent the night, and the next morning he was still alive, which was good. I thought, so how fast can I get this bird up and going again? But then I realized that my wife had already named him, so I was like, it's going to be a challenge to get him out of the door. She called him Kareltje, which is Dutch for Carl, and because we figured out, so what's the sound that a crow makes? Yeah, Carl, exactly. So if you ever get a crow, call him Carl, because then you can go, Carl. I figured that's what mommy, daddy crows call their kids all the time, right? Carl, come on. So we called him Carl, Kareltje, which is Dutch for Carl, little Carl. And I was like, okay, so what do we do with this guy? First off, let's put him outside, see if he flies away. And there's a very interesting thing that I discovered about crows, that there is a crow mafia in every neighborhood. Because I'd taken him from a different street and I put him in my backyard, and suddenly there was like bigger crows sitting on all the rooftops around me, and they were looking at me with this mean crow look, like, what's this new guy doing over here, right? And they started circling over, and they came really close, and eventually this one big crazy El Crow-pone, I guess, he went to sit next to Kareltje, and he just looked at him like, what you up to, man? And Kareltje was blind, and he was like, I don't know. And then the big crow flew off, and all the other crows flew off, and apparently, he was entered into the neighborhood. So then it was like, so, what do we do with this guy? So what do crows eat? Anything. So, okay, this is something I knew. I'm a biologist, so what's the best thing I could give him? So I decided to make him this superfood smoothie, right? So I got like protein powder, and I got like chia seeds and oatmeal and creatine, and I almost got him on steroids, but I didn't have them laying around. And I put that in a syringe, and I started feeding him. And he started calling me, which is really cool. So every time I heard him go, caw, and I go, oh, caw, and I went out and I fed him. And before I knew it, I was in a very deep and profound relationship with this stupid little bird. Then a cool thing happened in the afternoon where his parents found him. They had found him, and he was sitting in our garden, but he couldn't go away. So the parents decided to come into my garden and to try to take care of him. So, for example, and this is a point where I realized that if this little guy doesn't make it, it's just natural selection. Like, this has got to be the stupidest bird you've ever seen. He was broken up, and his kind of survival instinct started coming up, and there was a certain moment where he realized, like, okay, I've got this beak, and I should probably peck something. But he didn't know what to do, so he went around the garden, and he'd like peck a stick, and no, that's not it. And then he went to my shoe, and he pecked my shoe, no, that's not it. And he was just confused around, and then his dad came in, and he kind of regurgitated these worms, and he pointed at them, and I was like, this is what you should eat. And he went to that, and he went, oh, no, that's definitely not it. And then like the parents would start to go pecking at him like, dude, this is what we've been out working our butts off to get you this stuff, right? That whole thing happened. So as you noticed, I was pretty deep in crow relationship, family relationship by now. Some very interesting things happen. So usually crows only do caw, caw, make this same sound all the time, right? But then I started noticing that there's a profound difference between their different calls in relation to what's happening around them. For example, when a cat would enter the garden, they would have a certain distress signal for, there's a cat entering the garden, guys, be careful. And there would be the signal for this crazy guy who's trying to feed you protein shakes coming into the garden was exactly the same as the distress signal for the cat. And throughout the next 2 days, their language started to change. So they developed a new sound, which meant crazy guy with superfood smoothies is walking into the garden, right? So there was a crow sound for this guy coming into the yard. And I started learning seven or eight different sounds that they made. I started checking out all of their behavior. I don't know, I was at home, I was working from home at the time, but I was of course doing my crow observation. And every time I heard this little guy shout for food, I'd run out with my superfood smoothie and my syringe and I'd feed him. So yeah, it was a cool couple of days. So I learned their language, which is awesome, because the parents started to recognize that I wasn't actually, so I might be dangerous, but he might be a good guy, so we don't know, but he just had a different signal. So at that time, I realized that I was trying to adopt a little crow into my family, and then I realized that I had been adopted into a crow family, which is very cool. Now, how many of you figured this story was going to have a happy ending? It might be disappointing. So the next morning, I wake up to the warning signal of cat. It was 6 in the morning, and I was like, oh, a cat. And I was like completely, like my reflexes were all in the crow world. Like the human world was nothing to me anymore. So I just jumped out of bed. I ran out of the garden. I got to the lawn, and there he was, little Kareltje, spread all over the lawn. His guts were everywhere. It was like all over the place. Yeah, that was an awe moment right there. And probably I've been watching too many chick flicks, or I don't know what it was, but I landed on my knees like this, like that. And I was sitting there in my underpants, in the pouring rain, right, movie moment, and I was going, Kareltje, wah! At which point my wife looked out of the window and went, oh my God. So as I was cleaning up, so it was kind of like this Game of Thrones Red Wedding moment where there was like big catastrophe. I know, so there's people who feel me on the Game of Thrones thing, right? And I was going around the yard trying to clean up this little baby crow to give him a proper burial. And then something really interesting happened. I felt this profound sadness I'd never felt before bubble up. And what I did next was one of the most profound learning experiences I've ever had in my life. Let me first take you back a bit into my life. When I was 12, 13, I picked up a nasty drug addiction. Whatever I could find to get me out of actual present reality was good for me. Video games and drugs and smoking and drinking and doing stupid stuff, whatever. And that kind of became a system in my life that I took with me. And by the time I was 24, 25, which is 5 or 6 years ago, I was 80 pounds overweight. I had like a careful selection of addictions that would kind of allow me to not classify as a real addict. I had this mind game going with myself. I was depressed. I was burnt out. I had migraines, my back hurt. I was supposed to be this young, healthy guy, but I was just basically an old, unhealthy, old guy, and I wasn't happy at all. And that's when a certain moment in my life where I realized, so what do I have in my life right now, and what have I been practicing before this moment? And all of the stuff I had been practicing had taken me out of the present moment, was all based in fear, and always trying to get somewhere where I wasn't. So I figured, okay, so let's try to see if I can flip that around. So instead of not being present, let's try to be here right now in reality. Instead of doing stuff based in fear, how about we do it based in love, which is the opposite of fear. And how do I practice that? So I started looking for practices in doing this. So I started going in meditation, I started running, and the first time I ran, it was like 400 meters, and I was standing against a tree coughing up, and I could taste my own blood, this whole terrible thing. I still smoked, but eventually I started to turn all those things around. So I started having a very hard time. I had bad knees and I couldn't run. And now eventually, last year, I ran a full marathon on my bare feet on an empty stomach below 4 hours. So that was cool. I was never able to really concentrate. I was always this horrible ADHD guy. I couldn't even finish a sentence. And then I figured, well, and also I was not at all literary, so I never read any books. And I got into this motion of finding stuff that I believed about myself that I wasn't supposed to be able to do, and then doing them anyway. So it's kind of like this rebellious, fuck the system, I'm doing it anyway. So my teachers told me I couldn't concentrate. I had no literary talent. So what I would do is I'd write a book about concentration, and I'd write it in a month. So I did that, and it worked, which is one of the reasons I'm here, actually. Oh, thanks. Thank you. I ended up running a bunch of ultramarathons. I started doing very small meditation practices where I would be literally going insane out of my mind from listening to me, to my monkey mind, after 3 minutes, to essentially doing very long So the whole ice thing, right? Everybody wants to know about the ice thing. The idea of stepping into a tub of ice or climbing an ice-cold mountain in just your shorts is that the cold keeps you in the present moment. There are no options. Either you're focused and you're here, or you're catching hypothermia. So, being here and present is actually one of the better things to do. So I did all of that. I went into training with this crazy Iceman guy. We swam under slabs of ice, and actually I spent this morning, the first thing I did this morning was sit in a big tub of ice, which maybe by the end of the story it will sound a bit more appealing to you. So I did all of this stuff, ran ultramarathons, wrote a book, all of these crazy things that seemed like, oh yeah, I'm a victory, I beat the challenge. And then in my why Kareltje moment, and I felt this profound sadness. So how can I do all of this stuff and then suddenly be completely emotionally wiped out by this stupid little bird who was going to die anyway if we were honest about it, And then the moment came, the epiphany came. That's what I've been practicing. That's what I've been practicing the whole time, to actually be present with an emotion that I had without having to escape reality. So all of this stuff seems like cool, kind of boundary-breaking, challenge-making, winning things, standing on top of a mountain and swimming under ice and running a marathon and that stuff. But that was all practice for actually doing hard stuff and being with whatever comes up. And I understand this morning you were talking about mindfulness. So that was kind of my personal discovery of mindfulness. And it was the first time in my life that instead of feeling an emotion and going, oh, no, you're not supposed to feel anything, let's do something else, I was like, hold on, let's just feel this. And that's where I cried, man, like a man. I was like, oh, and tears were for 3 days. And I just kept mourning. And I started playing sad music and watching like Lassie, the end of Lassie and all that thing. I was like, I suddenly understand all of these things, and it was amazing. And then I realized that this bird it wasn't about the bird, but he'd broken something, or fixed something inside of me that allowed me to actually be with those feelings. And I cried for my best friend who committed suicide when I was on drugs and didn't even cry about it. I cried for friends lost. I cried for like grandparents dying and all this stuff. And it was just amazing. And I had all of that to thank to the practice of being present with whatever is there. And it's a difficult practice. But it can be found in a lot of very fun, adventurous type of things. I'm very grateful that I never took the whole route of medication and talking about my problems to no end and just keep focusing on the stuff. I was like, okay, so what can we do? What can we actually do? So my question also to you is, what are you practicing every day? Because what you practice is what you get. Every waking moment in your life, you are paying attention to something. You are investing your attention to something. And anything you do causes you to learn something and causes you to gain something in life. And that's what this whole idea of mental fitness is about. It is about finding these little tiny steps that you can actually take in the present right now and using them to practice what you need, to get what you need. So being in a tub of ice is a wonderful practice. I can actually recommend it to everybody. Or start taking cold showers, which is actually a good thing. So the idea is, if you get a little bit out of your comfort zone, what is the thing that you practice? Well, you practice with looking something in the eye that's difficult and scary, and then doing it anyway. And if you do that from a place of love and curiosity, and from asking, hey, what can I learn from this? Then that's what you'll get. So if you practice self-love, you'll get self-love. And what I've noticed in speaking all over the world with this stuff, that there's the only category there is beautiful people. You guys agree with me? Yes. Right? I've been speaking about these things, going like on mountains with people, going into frozen lakes and doing meditation sessions and all this weird stuff. And this is true, what she said actually. Like my neighbors, they don't need to check the weather. Like if they hear me cheering outside in my underpants, they go, oh, Kasper's outside, it's freezing. Like they know. I'm that guy. Still am. Like this is my morning ritual. I do a bear crawl through my garden in my underpants. I step into a big tub of ice, and then I have this whole routine going, which sounds crazier than it actually is. It looks crazy from a distance, but this is one of those things when you're doing it, you realize, oh, this is what my body was meant to be doing. Because why would you be happy or healthy or strong or connected if you never have a reason to be that? The idea of getting out of the comfort zone is not about being uncomfortable. It is about giving your body and your mind a stimulus, a training stimulus that it needs in order to be able to be strong. Because if we can spend the entire day sitting on the couch by ourselves, eating, whatever, there's always enough food, why would we be strong? Why would we be healthy if we can always be in a temperature-controlled room, sitting down, being safe? There's no reason, there's no stimulus. Why would you have an emotionally interesting life where you can actually feel your own emotions if you can spend the entire day watching videos or watching TV where other people have profoundly emotional life and connecting with them through empathy, which is a great function that we have, which is why we all love each other. Like when I walked in, it was like, oh, all these people love each other, it's all here. This is what you're doing, right? You came from all over the place to be here, to be open, to be connected. It's the most amazing thing. You gave yourself a reason. And who's been uncomfortable today? Tiny bit, right? Ah, cool. You've been on stage and you weren't comfortable? Yeah, okay. Oh, I wasn't. Yeah. Or maybe you were too uncomfortable saying you were uncomfortable, in which case I'm sorry. So, it is all about the training stimulus. About giving yourself a reason to be strong, to be happy, to be healthy, to be connected. If you never do anything that creates, because the body's lazy, the brain, the mind is lazy, they always look for the easiest solution. For my personal life, the easiest solution was always going out of reality and finding something to numb everything out, to not actually feel it. And putting myself in places where I had to deal with the situation that was there, being a bit uncomfortable gave me a training stimulus, a reason to be better at focusing, to be better at being happy, to be better at being strong and being healthy. Because it's all a skill. So I started taking a skill-based approach to living a happy life. And if you look at happiness and connectedness and wonder, which is what this whole thing is about, not as something that is on the outside world that might happen to you someday if you do enough stuff that you're supposed to do. What if it's a practical skill that you can practice every day? Just by taking an approach that is easy and simple and fun and playful. Like, for example, taking a cold shower. Or just sitting and trying to be quiet for a while. Or taking care of a little bird. Or connecting to people that are around you. And it might be a bit scary to open yourself up, but then eventually there will always be this very wonderful reaction, which is what we have right here. The whole Sunday assembly is kind of like one of the best examples of that whole principle. So what I want to tell you is just find the tiniest, smallest little thing to practice. And ask yourself, what are you practicing, what are you learning? In any waking moment, you're paying attention, you are investing attention, and you are getting stuff back from it. If you wake up and you look in the mirror and you go, I don't look so good, that's what you're practicing, that's what you're getting. So every single bit of attention is valuable, and it's all there. And the good stuff, and this is what I've learned from little Kareltje, is that there are no negative emotions. I always had this idea of sadness being a negative emotion, you're not supposed to have it. And then it was like, oh, it's great to feel sad. I get the whole chick flick thing now and crying and looking for the emotional spaces. It's wonderful. But it starts out as this whisper. There's a little whisper inside. A very tiny little voice that tells you what the right thing is. That tells you that you're allowed to feel, that you're supposed to feel, that you're supposed to struggle. Because if life was meant to be easy, we'd all still be plankton, right? The reason that we're such incredibly capable, wonderful beings is because there's always been a struggle. The question is, how do you approach the struggle? Do you go in screaming, or do you go in careful and attentive? So this is my final little thing that I want to leave you with. Something that I like to say is that in that little moment with the stupid little bird, I was able to listen to that first little whisper of emotion coming up and to allow it. So I came up with this thing that I like to say, which is, the body whispers before it screams. And if you can listen to the whispers, you can save yourself a lot of screams. So, thank you for that. You guys are great. That was it.